December 7, 1941, a day that's etched in history. But for one family in England, it marked the last time they'd see their son. John Al, just 23 and a sailor on the USS Oklahoma, was starting his day when Japanese torpedoes struck his ship. For 83 years, he rested in a Hawaiian cemetery, his grave marked simply as unknown. Then, in December 2024, a phone call changed everything. John Al was finally coming home. This is the story of America's most. We've got a sacred promise in the military, no matter how long it takes. We'll always search for our fallen heroes. On December 7, 1941, the Japanese attack on Pearl Harbor took the lives of 2,403 Americans. That chaotic morning, thousands of young men, many still just teenagers, were fighting for their lives. The USS Oklahoma took 9 torpedo hits in just minutes and capsized in only 12, trapping hundreds of sailors inside. It was a tragic day, with 429 men losing their lives. Oklahoma alone, just 30 made it out. The USS Arizona had it even worse when its forward magazine blew up. In a heartbeat, 1,177 sailors and Marines were gone. The blast was so powerful that many were vaporized, and the fire was so intense that bodies fused with the ship's steel. Today, over 900 of those men still rest within the Arizona's hull. The ship was to wreck to raise, and the bodies were to tangled up in the debris to recover. So, the Arizona became a final resting place. A ship that's truly one of a kind in American military history, a memorial and a tomb all in one. Today, visitors stroll over the sunken battleship, peering down at the rusting hull that still drips oil into the harbor. Some call it the tears of the Arizona. But the Oklahoma, that story's different. Eventually, that ship was raised, and those brave men deserved to come home. In 1944, 3 years after the attack, Navy salvage crews finally brought up the USS Oklahoma and recovered the remains inside. What they found was absolutely heartbreaking. The bodies had been stuck underwater for years, making it super tough to identify them with the technology from the 1940s. Scientists could only figure out who 35 of the men were. The rest, 394 sailors and Marines, were laid to rest as unknowns at the National Memorial Cemetery of the Pacific in Honolulu, known as the Punch Bowl. Each grave has a simple message: here rests in honored glory a comrade in arms known but to God. For decades, these brave men were nameless, leaving their families back home with unanswered questions. They were letters missing action, leaving families with no closure. No bodies to bury, no goodbyes. Generations went by, brothers who fought together were lost, and parents passed away without knowing what happened to their sons. The sailors of the Oklahoma faded into history, remembered only by old photos gathering dust in homes across Kansas, Minnesota, or North Carolina. Then, in 2015, something incredible happened. The Defense POW Accounting Agency, DPAA, stepped in. The organization dedicated to finding America's missing service members kicked off Project Oklahoma. Their goal: to use modern DNA tech to finally identify every sailor who lost their lives on the USS Oklahoma. After 74 long years, these brave men would finally get their names back. In June 2015, military teams dug up 45 caskets holding the mixed remains of the crew. The bones had been buried together, all jumbled up for decades. And here's where it gets tricky. Identifying remains isn't like what you see on crime shows. You can't just run a DNA test and get a name right away. These scientists were dealing with tiny bone fragments that had been underwater and buried for over 70 years. Some pieces were so small, they were barely the size of a fingernail. The DPAA team had to extract DNA from thousands of these fragments and match them with genetic samples from living relatives, siblings, nieces, nephews, and even great-great-grandkids who never met the sailor. Helping identify. The Armed Forces DNA Identification Laboratory in Delaware processed over 15,000 bone samples from the Oklahoma project alone. And slowly, name by name, the unknown started coming home. Think about what 80 years means to a family. Neil Todd was 19 years old when he died on the Oklahoma. His younger brother Wesley was serving on another ship at Pearl Harbor, the USS Nevada, and survived the attack. Wesley spent the rest of his life wondering what happened to his brother. In 2020, at 98 years old, Wesley received a phone call. DPAA scientists had identified Neil's remains. After 8 decades, the Todd brothers would finally be reunited. "I never thought this day would come," Wesley told reporters. "I've waited my whole life." Elmer Jacobson was 21 when the Oklahoma capsized. For 81 years, his nieces and nephews only knew him from stories. The uncle who died at Pearl Harbor, the young man in the Navy photograph. In September 2022, Elmer was finally laid to rest with full military honors in Glenwood, Minnesota. 3 generations of his family gathered to welcome him home. "We deserve to have our family home," his great-niece said at the ceremony. "All these years, we didn't have a grave to visit. Now we finally do." John L. came to America from Newcastle, England. He was just 23, working as a seaman aboard the Oklahoma, far from home. When the ship went down, his English family received the worst possible news. Their boy was dead, buried as an unknown somewhere in Hawaii. In December 2024, Al became one of the last Oklahoma sailors to be officially accounted for. He was buried with full military honors in Albuquerque, New Mexico, 83 years after his death. The Navy flew the flag that draped his casket all the way to his surviving relatives in England. You might be wondering, if we identify the Oklahoma sailors, why not the Arizona? The answer is heartbreaking in its simplicity. When the Arizona's forward magazine exploded, it killed 1,177 men in seconds. The blast was so powerful that it lifted the 31,000-ton battleship out of the water. The subsequent fire burned for more than 2 days at temperatures exceeding 1,000. Many of those men weren't just killed, they were incinerated. Their remains became part of the ship itself. Only 229 sets of remains were recovered from the Arizona. Of those, only 107 could be identified using 1940s method. The rest, over 900 men, remain exactly where they fell on December 7, 1941. The Navy made a decision. Rather than disturb what had become a tomb, the Arizona would remain a permanent memorial. The ship would be honored where it lay. Today, surviving Arizona crew members can choose to have their ashes interred within the ship to be with their shipmates one final time. It's the ultimate homecoming, joining their brothers in the ship that became their grave. The Oklahoma project proved what modern science could accomplish. But DPAA's mission extends far beyond Pearl Harbor. More than 81,500 Americans remain missing from conflicts dating back to World War II, over 7,000 from the Korean War, more than 1,500 from Vietnam. DPAA sends teams around the world to remote Pacific islands, Korean War battlefields, Vietnamese jungles, even Nazi Germany aircraft crash sites. They work with foreign governments, sift through historical records, and literally dig through the earth searching for any trace of missing Americans. In fiscal year 2025, DPAA achieved something unprecedented. 231 identifications in a single year, the highest number in the A's history. This includes heroes from the Korean War, like Army Sergeant First Class Charles Ean, who tragically lost his life in the intense fighting of summer 1950. For 75 years, he was missing in action, but in December 2025, his remains were finally identified and brought back to his family. Then there's Private First Class Wayman Slayton from Alabama, just 18 when he was killed in Korea. His family waited 74 years to welcome him home. It's not just about finding remains, it's about honoring a promise. Every dog tag found means so much more. DNA match, every casket draped in the American flag is proof that America doesn't forget. So, how does DPAA actually identify these remains? It starts with research, coming through military records, unit diaries, battle reports, and witness accounts to narrow down who might be buried where. Then comes the recovery. Teams excavate sites using archaeological methods, carefully documenting every artifact, every fragment. The remains go to DPAA's laboratory in Hawaii or Nebraska. There, forensic anthropologists examine the bones, help figure out age, height, gender, and any injuries. Then there's DNA. The Armed Forces Medical Examiner System has a database of family samples. When they find a possible match, they contact living relatives for more testing. Once science confirms an identity, the DPAA reaches out to the family. After years, sometimes even a century, families finally discover what happened to their loved ones. And then it's time for the journey home. There's a saying in military culture. One left behind isn't just a saying, it's a promise between America and those who serve. When you raise your right hand to defend this country, America vows to bring you home, no matter what. Even after 80 years since Pearl Harbor, that promise holds strong. Scientists are still matching DNA, families are still getting those heart-wrenching phone calls, and flag-draped caskets continue to arrive at small-town airports across the nation. In December 2025, we lost the last survivor of the USS Oklahoma, Jesse Maffei, reminding us of the importance of that promise. He lived to be 102, long enough to see most of his shipmates finally identified and returned to their families. The men who lost their lives on December 7th, 1941 never thought they'd have to wait 80 years to come home. But now they are, with full military honors, their names restored, and their families finally able to say goodbye. That's the American promise. We won't stop searching. We won't forget. And no matter how long it takes, we'll bring them home. If this story touched you, hit subscribe. Don't forget to hit that bell for more incredible stories of Navy bravery and sacrifice. Check out our video on the Navy's heartfelt goodbye at sea. It's a touching tradition for every sailor. Thanks for watching. Wishing you fair winds and smooth seas.